I remember when I was about 10 years old, I had a nightmare and the nightmare was of worlds colliding. It was kind of like the story of the clashing of the worlds that Orson Welles put on. And I don't know, maybe a year or two later, I figured out, or maybe even sooner, that this nightmare was an argument between my mother and father. They were my worlds, and in the dream, the worlds were colliding, even though it didn't show up as people. And so I think in looking at my own world, my father was just an interesting and creative and funny guy, but he had a lot of immaturity, and he had a lot of ideas or attitudes that were not adult enough. And at some point in time, probably by the time I was 16 years old, my dad was more like a younger brother than a mature adult. And so I enjoyed his company, but I had to be careful about being overly influenced by ideas that he had. My mother, on the other hand, was very mature, and her ideas were solid, and she seemed to think clearly at any given time. And so I was fortunate enough to enjoy my dad's company, but really inherit my mother's wisdom. And so you have to think of your parents as collectively providing you the house that you live in. Genetically, you live in a house that's a combination of your mom and dad. But then your behavior, or your mom and dad's behavior, is as if it were in the attic of the house, and it's up to you to decide what you bring down into your living space. And I was fortunate in that I could enjoy the humor and the wit of my dad, but when it came time to knowing how to behave, I was really knowing what is honesty and what is integrity. I had a good model to look at that unfortunately wasn't my father, it was my mother.